the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, May 29, 2018, and the time is 7 o'clock p.m. Just wanted to FYI, Board Member Rob Hardy and Board Member Amy Gorwitz will be joining us just a little bit late this evening, so the vacancies on that side of the table will be full. Dr. Hillman, there were some items in the table file.
Yes, this evening we had 2 committee reports. We had several appointments, increase, decrease, change in assignment, and a couple of resignations. And then in addition, if we can also just notice that we're going to flip 2 reports tonight.
Oh, yes.
We're going to have the Compañeros report before the general fund budget report, so just if board members can make that note on their agenda. And that is all I have for those changes this evening.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Okay, thank you very much. If there are any objections, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for anyone residing in the Northfield Public School District to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? Okay, seeing no one come forward, we'll move on with announcements and recognitions. It is our honor tonight to welcome Logan Ledman, Jr. at Northfield High School, to read his essay, American History, Our Hope for the Future. Dr. Hillman, did you want to give some other context to the speech?
Sure, Logan, come on up to the microphone, and notice he doesn't have any notes to read from because he's got it memorized. And just so folks know, Logan won our local Voice of Democracy contest right here in Northfield. Then he went on to the state level, and he won the state level, which earned him a trip to Washington, D.C., where he placed 7th in the nation. And those of us who were at the Memorial Day celebration at Veterans Park here in Northfield yesterday had a chance to hear it. And what I can tell you and the folks at home this evening is they are in for a treat. So, Logan, we're very proud of you. We're proud of your hard work. We're proud of how good of an ambassador you are for Northfield Public Schools and for Northfield in general. So, without further ado, Logan Ledman.
Thank you. I'll get right into it then. My speech is titled American History, Our Hope for the Future. In the War of 1812, an American named Francis Scott Key was locked aboard a British ship to negotiate the release of some prisoners. Kept aboard the ship, Key was helpless to do anything but watch all night as the British bombarded Fort McHenry. Key held his breath as the first rays of dawn spread over the fort. Illuminated in the morning sun was a 30-foot wide flag still waving, a magnificent banner spangled with stars. The American troops had survived the night. On the back of a postcard, Key wrote the first stanza of a poem, ending it with a question. Oh say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? It's a question and a challenge that reaches across the ages. And as long as we look to the lives and the sacrifices of those who have served our country, the flag will wave. As long as American history remains told, we can look back on their examples for guidance. Where can we look to gain this guidance and clarity? We can look at any branch of service, soldiers, sailors, airmen. We can look at any corner of America at any time in history and find these heroes. I look to the teenage farm boys of the Revolution who left their families and their homes behind. These young men as full of energy as their newfound country braved peril after peril in their struggle to bring forth a country conceived in liberty. Their generation began stitching Key's flag. I look to enslaved fathers in the Civil War who bled for the chance to break free from oppression and bondage. Heroes who looked death in the eye for the promise of bringing forth a new birth of freedom. Their generation completed the bloody work of crafting Key's flag. I look to men hardened by the blows of the Depression, taking bullets across the ocean, and to the women who saved their lives in bloody hospital beds. It's the greatest generation indeed. I am inspired by their heroism and by the immense good our World War II veterans did for the world. Their generation hoisted the flag for the globe to see. I look to poor kids struggling through a war they don't understand. There are few things that amaze me more than the extraordinary perseverance of those who found themselves in Vietnam. While the war itself remains contentious, no one can deny the sacrifices of those who came home as veterans and those who came home in caskets. Their generation etched the flag into the nation's soul. I look to patriots who took up arms when their country was under attack. Every man and woman who enlisted to beat back terror will be remembered for their contribution, and we can only hope that they gain the recognition and honor they deserve. Their generation holds the flag steady. From the plains of Yorktown to the halls of Montezuma, from the fields of Gettysburg to the trenches of the Argonne, on blood-soaked shores in Normandy and thundering jungles in Da Nang, in biting winters at Valley Forge and sweltering deserts in Afghanistan, the men and women of the American military have demonstrated the utmost in dedication to their families and to their country. Most especially, those buried in the cloak of the stars and stripes, and those whose fates are still unknown to this day. When Francis Scott Key saw Old Glory rippling in the breeze of dawn, it was more than a flag. It represented the dreams, values, and intangible qualities of his young country. As we seek to write our story into the flag, it's our duty to search for guidance in their example. If we can all attempt to understand their sacrifices, there are eternal lessons to be found. I could talk about them for hours. Instead, I implore you, seek out a veteran. Talk to them. Learn more about the stories of those who came before us. Learn from those who've sewn our flag. Search for the heart of America's heroes, and you will come away forever changed. And then you will be ready to stitch your story into the flag. Thank you. Have a good night.
I think we should see if people have any questions or comments for Logan. He's not going to get away that easily.
No, you are not running away that easily, young man. That was really powerful and just beautifully, beautifully done. And we are so proud of you. Just absolutely amazing. And thank you for spending some time tonight and sharing it with us. And you, as Dr. Hillman alluded to your speech on Monday at the Memorial Veterans Park, you could hear a pin drop. I mean, you captured the audience. And as those of us who were there felt extremely proud of you. So.
Thank you. That's very kind of you, and I'm honored to read it here with you guys tonight.
Excellent. Any other comments?
Sure, Mike's on. No.
I think it is. I'll go closer to the thing. Any other comments? Amy?
Not only is it an excellent speech, you have a wonderful voice to listen to, and I know you probably have many plans with your life, but throw in doing voiceovers or something, or just for fun. I think you have a great career wherever you decide to go.
I appreciate that suggestion, Anne. Thank you.
I think Logan is already, because if you remember just a couple of years ago when our robotics team won the international award for their safety video, the voiceover was done by none other than Logan Ledman, correct?
The reveal, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and am I correct in recalling that you helped win the popcorn video at Northfield Middle School? Were you part of that?
Oh my gosh, I haven't thought about that in a long, long
I
time.
thought about that because it was a
think you're
great
right.
video. You and Sam Temple.
That was a
You won the $100 popcorn video challenge. Jackie Megan.
I completely forgot about that.
I did.
It was so long ago.
You've already got an impressive resume, Logan, so well done.
Middle school wasn't that long ago, so now you can sympathize with your parents when they don't always remember.
There you go, yeah.
So yes, that was extremely well done. We saw the talent early on. Excellent.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Jeff, you had a comment.
Great job. I have a BA in speech from a private college. I know how hard it is to deliver a well-done speech and memorize that. So thanks for doing that. I was at the ceremony yesterday, and I just thank you for your devotion and your articulating the message. And it's just fun to see high school kids come out and do that. So we need, just get some more in the pipeline like yourself. So get recruiting. So anyway, great job and good luck in your future.
Thank you.
All right, we will let you go.
Thank you,
Have a
Logan.
good night. Thank you, guys.
Nice job. What an amazing treat for us. Okay, so we will move on
We do have
now.
one more announcement.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr.
So we have one more announcement this evening. This is about the Making a Difference Award, and in recognition and celebration of community members and organizations who positively influence the life of Northfield youth, the Northfield Healthy Community Initiative, in conjunction with the Northfield News, presents the Making a Difference Award. And the acknowledgement is a way to commend and appreciate the people and groups who invest in Northfield youth and families through leadership, engagement, service, and valuing youth. And this is going to seem, you're going to have to hold on for a minute for a connection here, but the May and June recipient of the Making a Difference Award is Emmaus Church. But the reason there's a school connection is because it's their gracious support and investment in our Community Services Division by hosting the Adult Basic Education Program. Emmaus has provided space and storage for our adult basic education classes throughout the school year and will continue again next school year. And again, this is due to a lot of our space shortages that we have been talking about, specifically as it relates to community services. And so on Wednesday, May 23rd, a celebration was held to present this award to Emmaus and to recognize students in the Adult Basic Education Program who made level gains in the last quarter. So we appreciate, again, part of our vision statement is community partnerships. This is just another example of how when we don't have the space, a community partner has stepped in to help us out. So thank you to Emmaus for their impact on adult basic education, and thanks for our Community Services Division for their living out of our vision of being collaborative and having strong partnerships within the community.
Excellent. It's wonderful to represent them, or recognize them. So other comments board members have, or anything to add, announcements? I just wanted to touch again on the Memorial Day service and how involved our district was in that event. Dr. Hillman actually presented comments at the event, and they were very well done, as we would all expect. Mary Williams and the Northfield High School Band were there to provide just wonderful music, and of course, Logan Letman stole the show. So it was really great to have so much representation of our school district that day. Okay, so we will now move on for items for report, and we will begin with the Compañeros program. Here to present is Director of Teaching and Learning, Mary Grace Hansen, and teachers April Osterman, Anna Rubin, and Danielle Hermanson. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here tonight. That's a very hard act to follow, isn't it?
I know.
Oh, you had to do it the other day. Okay. Well, and as Chair Pritchard said, we have Anna Rubin, second grade Compañeros teacher at Bridgewater, Danielle Amundsen, second grade Compañeros teacher at Greenville Park, and April Osterman, fifth grade Compañeros teacher at Sibley, here with us tonight. These three have taken on the added responsibility this year of being Compañeros lead teachers at each of the buildings. And that's meant that we've had several meetings throughout the year to plan, to talk, to problem solve, to keep the Compañeros program alive and well and consistent between the three buildings. So we'll let them take over and give you some information.
So a little bit about the program, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but it had some changes in the relative recent future. But we're a two-way dual Spanish immersion program. So the two-way means that we have students in our classrooms where English is their first language and others where Spanish is their first language. And our goal is to teach English to them as well as Spanish. And we spend half of our day in English and the other half in Spanish. We teach Spanish literacy, math, some science, and some social studies in Spanish. And then English literacy, health, specials, and some science and social studies in English.
All right, and now we have some videos for a chance to see us in action. First up is Robert Garcia. He teaches fourth grade Compañeros at Greenville Park. Here he is teaching a math lesson. Do we know how to play that?
You just move the mouse, and
Oh, here's the mouse.
you can click right in the middle. There you go.
¿Cómo? ¿Tercero? Ok. So, tercero está buscando eso. ¿Cuál insecto? Ok. So, ¿en cuál página está? ¿265 o 274? Ok, aquí está. Ok. So, ustedes van a usar su reloj. Mira, no puedo usar esto porque mira, está muy grande aquí, ¿no? En tu página están más pequeños. Okay. So, ¿cuántas pulgadas va a ser grande? 0 amarillo. ¿Cuánto? 13 octavos, 4 octavos, 8 octavos, 8 octavos es 1.
So you can see here that all of our math is taught in Spanish. The lesson was on measurement, and they were measuring pictures of insects. Oops. This next video highlights a first grade Spanish guided reading lesson about plants. It shows integration of Spanish literacy and science content with Anita Sassy at Sibley. We won't watch the whole.
Se llama ¿Dónde viven las plantas? ¿Puedes leer para mí? Lean el título.
¿Dónde viven las plantas?
¿Tú crees que este libro, abre el libro y mira las fotos? No, déjame mostrarte las fotos, yo te muestro. Mira, cierra tu libro por un rato, cierra tu libro, Lili. Cierra tu libro. Mira estas fotos. Yo veo cosas ahí. Este libro se llama ¿Dónde viven las plantas? ¿Será este libro de ficción o será de no ficción? ¿Lili? ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué será no ficción? Julie? Porque dice que dice cosas de verdad o dice cosas que son falsas. De verdad o fantasía. ¿Qué es? ¿Verdad o fantasía? ¿Entro?
Verdad.
Verdad. Ok, vamos a pedir en página número 2. Número 2. ¿Todos en 2? Yo leo la primera oración. Y tú sigues con tus ojos y con tu dedo, ¿ok? Tú puedes ver muchos tipos de plantas. Ayuda. Repita.
Tú puedes ver muchos tipos de plantas.
Julia, ¿pueden leer la siguiente?
Algunas plantas viven en la tierra.
Laura y Owen, ¿pueden leer la siguiente?
Otras viven en el agua.
Pero dice, no dice otros, dice otras. Ajá. Lili y Julie, ¿pueden leer la siguiente?
Vamos a ver algunas plantas que ves.
Oh, pero aquí hay un punto. Entonces tienes que decir,
Oh, okay. Even at first grade, they're reading quite well. And one more quick one here. This will be highlighting a science content lesson taught by me, Anna Rubin, at Bridgewater.
Ok, ayer leímos este libro, ¿recuerdas? Acerca del ciclo de agua. ¿Recordamos el ciclo? ¿Sí? Pues tengo una foto aquí. El ciclo del agua. Tenemos aquí agua, la nube, el sol. ¿Quién puede poner una de estas palabras en el lugar correcto en la foto? Tenemos las palabras condensación, repite.
Condensación.
Precipitación.
Precipitación.
¿La operación aquí? Sí. Sí, fantástico. ¿Otra de las palabras? ¿Sí? ¿En la nube? Sí, fantástico. Compensación. Y la última palabra.
It's always impressive to see how the young students are doing so well in Spanish. We thought about doing the whole presentation in Spanish, just for your benefit, but decided against it. This is a chart with the enrollment numbers for compañeros. There is one section of compañeros at each grade level, 1st through 5th, at each of the 3 elementary schools. And because, of course, there are 4 sections, we like to keep the enrollment in compañeros at about 25% to keep the rest of the class sizes as consistent as possible. And you can see 1st grade is a little bit, 1st and 2nd grade are a little bit above that, but then we do have some attrition. Some students move out over the years, so we sometimes have a few more students enroll in 1st and 2nd grade. This year, we were very fortunate to be able to participate in a grant that was received by the University of Minnesota. It's not our grant, we're participants in the University of Minnesota grant in the Dual Language Immersion Program. We had 3 teachers who are participating in the Dual Language Immersion Certificate Program, and that would be Anna Rubin, April Osterman, and Amy Tashney. And they've spent the last year in classes, and you have classes
1 left in the fall.
1 left in the fall, and they will receive a certificate of dual language immersion instructors. And we have 1 teacher who's interested in starting in the 2nd cohort this coming fall. We also had Anita Sass, she was the 1st grade teacher, participate in another aspect of the grant, which was preparing a curriculum for parents and families of students in dual language immersion programs. And we offered 4 sessions from February through April at Greenville Park in conjunction with the community school, which worked out well because they provided childcare and child activities for the students, so we were very happy to partner with them. And we started the evening with a light supper, and then Ruben Alvarez and Charlie Alvarez were the facilitators of this program. And the one drawback, if you will, to this was the sessions were extremely scripted because it's part of a grant, and the University of Minnesota wanted to know reactions to their very scripted program. We had a great participation. In fact, there were several schools in the city's area where we would get emails saying, if you have less than 6 people show up, you'll have to decide if you want to do it. We had between 20 and 30 people every night, and we were probably the smallest school in the school district in the study. But the parents were very happy to participate in this program. We gave out over 20 perfect attendance certificates. If they attended all 4 meetings, they received a perfect attendance certificate. Dr. Hillman spoke one evening, and then the elementary principals were there one evening too to thank the parents for their participation in this. We are looking to do this again next year, perhaps not all 4 evening sessions, because to ask parents to give up 2 hours on 4 different nights is quite a commitment, but something we could perhaps do for incoming kindergartners, and then of course next year's 1st graders would not have participated in this. So we will start looking at that in January and see what we can offer next year.
So I'm going to talk about some of our plans for the upcoming year as a compañero staff. We are planning to get all of the 15 compañeros teachers together to do a book study using this book called Dual Language Instruction from A to Z on how to efficiently coordinate our language objectives with the science, social studies, and health content objectives, all the while teaching Spanish. After the 2 days that the elementary staff gets together in June for the CCC training, The compañero staff will have an additional day on June 13th to plan how to coordinate the CCC objectives and materials with our Spanish literacy objectives. The compañero staff from all 3 buildings plan to meet 4 times over the course of the next year to continue working on this CCC integration. And during all of these planning days, we plan to specifically address how to support our emerging students in the program reach a proficient level so that they can be more independent learners in Spanish. We are in discussions of how the Amity intern program will look in all 3 of the buildings. And we are planning to meet with the middle school Spanish teachers to reevaluate the transition between 5th grade compañeros and the 6th grade Amistades program. Este es el fin de nuestra presentación. ¿Ustedes tienen preguntas para nosotros? ¿En inglés o español?
I think she asked for questions.
So, board members, first of all, thank you for the presentation. It's really, really great to have you here talking about this program. It's a very popular choice program, in Northfield. So it's just great for the board to just get up to speed with the things that are happening in this program. So, board members, questions. Amy.
Hi, thank you for coming. I have a couple of different questions. First, about the parents' meeting. I think it's great you're getting the parents together, but I didn't quite catch what the purpose of the meetings was.
That would be me. There were 4 different meetings. The last one was college and career readiness. Then there was a meeting on what a dual language immersion program looked like, what parents could do to help at home, and what curriculum and objectives there were. And then they used a lot of national statistics about how students who learn another language generally achieve better.
So did you find the parents who attended were a good mix of the English-speaking parents and the Spanish-speaking parents, or?
Actually, yes. And Ruben and Charlie did such a great job. They had 2 screens going, one in English, one in Spanish, and they would switch back and forth from English to Spanish flawlessly, which was great for both sets of parents, English-speaking or Spanish-speaking, because they each got a feel for the other language. So that was really a highlight of the program and a highlight of having Ruben and Charlie do it.
And then I think it's great that these students get an opportunity to learn a second language, especially in each case, but I'm wondering specifically with the English speakers who are learning Spanish, and then we're not immersed so much in the Spanish culture the same way the Spanish students who are learning English have English all around them all the time. So do you have any sense, even if it's anecdotal, as to once they graduate from the Compañeros program, how much they retain, especially the English-speaking students who are doing Spanish, or how it's affected them in the long term?
We have quite a few students who go on in Spanish and continue. We offer 2 AP classes in Spanish at the high school, and those are very well attended. And I'll turn it over to any of you who have a comment on that?
Well, of the 3 of us, I've been teaching the program for 20 years, the longest. So I have, my first group of students are, I think, 30 right now. But several of them have gone on to use Spanish in their career. I know of one that is teaching in Mexico in some sort of school, an international school, but he's teaching in Spanish. I know others that have done like nursing, and they use that with their jobs. So I don't have specific numbers, but it is fun to hear that their parents say, oh, we remember when we did this, and this really helped them get an interest in the language, and now they're doing this with it. So I think that's a very positive part of the program.
So I just want to also mention too that when the Compañero students leave 5th grade, they do have an option for Spanish instruction in 6th grade, where regular middle school students who weren't in the Compañeros program, they don't have that option until 7th grade. So think of it almost as kind of like our accelerated math track. It's an accelerated track where students continue that Spanish language instruction in 6th grade, continue 7th and 8th grade. As Mary mentioned, we've had a few modifications to our secondary Spanish curriculum over the years, including adding a second AP course just a couple of years ago. As those students get handed off, I think that what any of these teachers will also tell you is that what you said is very important. We can teach them very good Spanish skills all the way through that second AP course, but what I understand from people who really know this is unless the student chooses to go be immersed in a Spanish-speaking culture, they will not really cross over that line, to being truly fluent. And what I understand is it actually doesn't even take a tremendous amount of time, a 6 or 12-week, a semester kind of infusion into a country where the primary language is Spanish. Am I saying that right? Does that?
Yeah.
So I think that and what I can tell you is that is the students understand that. So as they transition to middle school, Chris Howard, who's one of the teachers at the middle school, really explains that to students that we're going to get you there. We're going to give you all the skills, but you have to go and use those skills. So I think they start pretty well with that at an early age, and that's carried through the program. I am really excited too to see that relook at how the secondary curriculum aligns with the Compañeros curriculum, because if you think about it, the new curriculum, right, the new approach, those students are in 8th grade this year. So when they were in 1st grade, that was the first self-contained classroom. Those students are now in 8th grade preparing to enter the high school curriculum. So I'm really happy to see looking at that alignment again, because it's about time, right? So thank you for doing that.
Excellent. Great question.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? I have a couple. Before the meeting, Danielle and April and I were reminiscing about the 2010 review, and you just alluded to that process. There was some of us here on the board at that time, and it was a really great process, and it really enhanced the literacy aspect of that program and brought it to each of the buildings. So it was really a good thing. I had a question, and you may not be prepared to answer this, and it may not be current, but I kind of dug through some of my old notes, and at the time when we did the review in 2010, it said in early elementary grades, research indicates that students in a dual language program may score lower on standardized tests of academic achievement than their peers in a single language program. Obviously, 10-year-old research, just do you have a sense for how the students are doing? And one of my questions specifically around standardized tests was math, because they're learning it in Spanish. So how is that working on the MCA? And then part of that too within the RTI program, where there's math interventions, how does that work for those students who are learning that course in Spanish? So I know this is double, sort of threw a lot at you with that question.
Well, I'm the only one that has my students take MCAs, and I would say for math, my scores are they're very comparable to my peers. I mean, some years, of course, with different groups of students,
sure.
It varies a little bit, but relatively, considering all things, are pretty similar. But also, a lot of the Spanish words in math have cognates in English. So, división, multiplicación, like a lot of it is very familiar to them.
Okay.
And we spend a lot of time, like the week before the test, really reviewing the different vocabulary and ways to see it. But this year there was a feature on the 5th grade test where you could hover over certain words that were underlined and it would show a word in Spanish. The rest of the problem was in English, so I'm not sure how many or if any of my students use that, but we talked about that being an option that would be available for them.
Oh, that's excellent. Sure, and that didn't obviously exist 10 years
Right,
ago.
right.
Okay, excellent. And then my other question was around waiting lists, a lottery. Have we seen that, how the numbers work?
Well, actually, this is the first year in the past 7 or 8 years that we've had to have a lottery, and they had a lottery at Bridgewater and Greenville Park. They had 41 register at Bridgewater and 39 at Greenville Park, I believe. So they did do a lottery. Sibley had, I believe, 28, so they stayed. So we do have procedures in place that if we have to, we can have a lottery.
Excellent. And then I guess the one question too then would, like interventions with RTI where math, we don't necessarily, RTI isn't necessarily set up to
Right.
to instruct. So how does that work for those students who may need that extra
Well, that's one of the
support?
things that Danielle had talked about for our emerging readers. She didn't really say anything about math, that we really don't have anything in place to do an intervention in Spanish at this point.
We do as the interns though, somewhat.
Right, right. If you have an Amity intern, they sometimes will do an intervention in Spanish. Can I ask one question?
Yes.
So one of the things that we changed in the last couple of years was going from a single building mentor for teachers to having some specific mentors, one for general education teachers, one for special education teachers, and then one for compañeros teachers. And would you just like to talk about why that's important? I think it's really important because while you're doing many of the same things, would you just share your experience with that in this first year of, because I believe all of you are the building level mentors. So could you just share a little bit about that?
It's been really nice for my building. I'm at Greenvale. We had 2 new teachers in the last 2 years, so I was able to serve kind of just as a go-to person for the compañeros aspect, but then they also had the new teacher mentor also, so it was really nice with the number of new teachers that both Ruben and Charlie were able to use me and Sarizak. The other thing that has been very nice is not only am I serving as the go-to person, but also just someone for my principal to communicate, and then I can communicate out to the other 4 teachers. I can, we meet, the 4 of us meet, we can decide some things in a smaller group, and then we can bring it out to our bigger staff. It's really helped with communication. It's really helped with planning, and I just feel like it's a huge hole that we've had in the past that has really been filled. I feel so much more solid with my group of 5 compañeros students at our school than I ever have.
That was great. If anybody else wants to share your experience with it.
Yeah, I'm at Bridgewater, and we've been pretty stable in our teachers, our compañeros teachers over the years. But even so, just having the opportunity to meet once a month for a compañeros PLC has been incredible. Just talking, okay, what are we doing? Building that consistency between the schools and making sure we're all on the same page, and talking about the Amity that's from Spain that we have and what she can do. Yeah, it's just been really helpful that way.
And I have to add one more thing. I think with the upcoming CCC integration, it's going to be critical for us to have someone to bounce ideas off, because I am the only 2nd grade compañeros teacher in my class, or in my school, and there's only 1 3rd grade, only 1 4th grade, but when we can come together and, be on the same page, it's really helpful.
And I think this goes to our strategic plan, ongoing priority of recruiting and retaining a diverse staff. And I think the key thing is, one of the things that we learned when we brought the mentoring program back is that the needs of new teachers and even veteran teachers who might be coming to a new building are very diverse. And when you're teaching the compañeros program, there's a whole different set of mentoring needs for those folks. And so I really appreciate the 3 of you stepping up. You get a very minimal set of compensation, so you are doing this because you love the program, and I just want to publicly tell you how appreciative I am that you stepped forward to do that, because that quality mentoring, what we know is that is a huge asset in making sure that we can retain our compañeros staff. And you may remember, for a number of years, every year we were out looking for a new compañeros teacher. I don't believe that we're doing that next year. For a full-time replacement anyway.
Right.
So we may have a few long-term substitutes for return, but we have a strong compañeros team across all 3 buildings and all 5 grade levels. And I think that this mentoring piece is part of it, because the work that they've been able to do across buildings, it sounds to me like you're feeling more like a true district team than you ever have before.
Yes.
So wanted to point that out, and just, we really appreciate that your work you're doing. We know that many places come to look at us, as a model for how we deliver this and the sustainability of it. You know that lots of immersion programs have come and gone in the 20 years that we've had the program, and so that goes to the quality people who are leading those programs. So thank you very much for your efforts and making us all look good. So we appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments, board members?
Excellent.
No.
I remember when in Companeros with on a life support system. And not only has it survived, but it's flourished, and that's really good news. And thank you for your work and for your support. Thank you for your work.
Excellent. Well, I don't think we could have said anything better. Thank you. So thank you. So enjoy the rest of your evening. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent update, thank you.
Okay, so we now move on to the proposed 2018-19 general fund budget. Here to present Val Mertisthorpe, Director of Finance.
Good evening. So I'm going to present the 18-19 proposed budget for the general fund. And we'll just get going. So as you know, about 65% of our total revenue is generated by our enrollment. So that's a really significant projection that we do not only every year, but multiple times during the year to make sure that we're tracking where we're at. So for 18-19, we are projecting about 4,035 average daily membership is what ADM stands for. And that's weighted 1.0 for K through 6 and 1.2 for grades 7 through 12. So that weighted figure, we are for 18-19, sorry, 4,089, I was on the wrong row, is about 4,500 adjusted pupil units. So the adjusted pupil units is what most of the formulas are actually based on. So the increase in the basic formula is on the 4,500. So just a little, we have had a pretty significant increase in enrollment from 14-15, 15-16, and then to 16-17. We are projecting that to slow down a little, but a lot of that, as you know, is open enrollment, which is pretty hard to project. So we'll keep an eye on how that comes in, and any significant changes would be addressed with the revised budget. But we, the models are conservatively showing that we'll still be increasing enrollment, just at a slower pace, if that makes sense. So for our revenue assumptions, since this is the second year of the biennium, we know that we will be getting a 2% increase in the per pupil formula, which will be $6,312 per pupil, which is a $124 increase. Enrollment obviously is a significant portion of that, which we just talked about is slightly increasing. And special ed is another significant portion of our state revenue, and I have that held flat. The state has a calculation that gives us basically a minimum and a maximum. I have budgeted for the minimum because we know we aren't going below that figure. We have typically come in a little higher than that, but with the ongoing kind of stabilization of the Cannon Valley Special Ed Co-op, I would rather be conservative because they're still kind of working through that. The first year, the revenue was treated a little different because the formula is based on prior year expenditures. They didn't have prior year expenditures. So things are kind of still stabilizing for them. They are having some cash flow concerns just because they're paid on prior year expenditures and they've been increasing their programming. So they're kind of always behind the 8 ball, starting from ground zero. So I do believe that the member districts will be asked to basically loan subsec money that will be paid back in 3 to 5 years, basically just to help initially get their fund balance built up and stabilize the program. So that is just a conservative estimate. Again, it's always kind of a moving target, but we try to keep an eye on it and see where it goes. But we have had an increase each year. And on average, the state does reimburse. Their goal is 55 to 65 cents on the dollar for each of our special ed expenditures. So the property taxes, as you know, we received a generous increase to our operating referendum. So we will be at $1,967.32 per pupil. which is a pretty significant increase for our property tax revenue. Federal sources is always a little uncertain at the federal level, so I have a conservative decrease. We do not have our title allocations yet. Our special ed allocation looks to be about the same. So, and we do have 2 smaller federal grants that will be falling off as well. So, our local sources, we continue to see a pretty strong interest earnings, so some increase there. We did have a reduction in, we were able to charge a one-time administrative fee for hosting the contracts for the Canyon Valley Special Ed. So that was about $230,000 of revenue that we received last year that we will not be receiving going forward. And then the reduction in class fees that was approved with the last budget. I had a note in your narrative from one of the teachers at the high school about what a positive change that has been. So I thank you for supporting that and moving forward with that. So as far as the numbers, you can kind of see they are typically pretty similar. There's obviously a larger increase for property taxes due to the operating referendum. The state sources is primarily just due to the 2% increase in the basic formula. And then the decline in federal and the decline in local. So we are looking at a total budget of just over $54 million for our revenue. And then just a note for the 16-17 audited results, I did exclude the subsec amounts just because they were both equal amounts in revenue and expenditures, so it was easier for consistency to look at it that way. On the expenditure side, we are looking at about a 2.3% aggregate increase for salaries. We do have a settled contract with the teachers, but we are currently negotiating all of our 16 other contracts, some of which were approved at the last board meeting, or this, I think they're on this board meeting. So all of those are kind of in flux at this time. And so those are an estimate. The board did also authorize the increase to the contingency fund, so I've built that in, and we will have the first time English learner pre-kindergarten class that we will be funding the teacher for at NCRC. So those are some of the changes there. Benefits, there is a 0.21% increase in TRA that I believe is still waiting for the governor's signature, but we believe will be signed. We don't have any reason not to believe that at this point. That is about a 2.8% increase. The pension bill is a 0.21% increase for 5 years and a 0.2% increase in the 6th year. And the 6th year is also a 0.25% increase for the employee. That is on average about $50,000, obviously increasing with the rate of salaries as well. But there is also some state aid attached to that, is my understanding. So how that comes through, it sounds like it's going to cover the cost, but I don't have that budgeted in because I wasn't 100% sure if it was going to be a one-for-one. And $50,000 isn't going to swing our $54 million revenue too significantly. The other major increase for benefits is just the increased participation in our health and dental program. As I presented the self-insurance fund, we do have a very strong health and dental program, and we continue to see increased enrollment in that and increased participation. We did decrease the contribution rates, so the increase that we see in the budget is actually less than it could have been, but it is still an increase because we do have more participation, which is great. That means we are attracting people for our benefits, which is good. We will retain them. Non-salary and other operational costs, we have some continued implementation of the collaborative classroom and some of the individualized pieces that support that program. And we are proposing an additional bus route, which is about $70,000. So that's a pretty big ticket item. We've had obviously increased enrollment, and we have seen quite a few more concerns from parents this year about overcrowding and those sorts of things, which is typical at the beginning of the year until sports get started and everybody kind of gets into the routine, but it's been a little more consistent throughout the year. And so I've had a couple different meetings with Benjamin Bus, and there's some data in your narrative about the ridership data and things that they've seen from their perspective. So we are proposing that for next year. And then our fund balance goal is 16% of our total expenditures. I did the expenditures a little bit differently this year just for some clarity and comparative purposes. So I have them included by program and by object, so you can see them kind of in two different ways. And I pulled out the capital outlay. So that is everything in our 500 object code series, which is equipment, site improvement, building improvement, those types of larger capital items. And so you can see those on the bottom, just pulled out separately so that increases and decreases that you see across years are a little more consistent with just the programmatic pieces, if that makes sense. Sometimes especially when we've gone from 700,000 to 2 million in a 4-year span, that can really swing some of the programmatic areas. So that's helpful to kind of break that out. So as far as programmatic changes goes, there's just a handful of things that I wanted to call out. The district support services looks like it increased a little bit more than normal, and that is a coding change. MDE requires us to code things according to UFARS, which is the Uniform Financial Accounting and Reporting Standards. They have added a network administrator code, and so basically our director of technology and our network administrator salaries were moved from the instructional support category up to district support services, and that's just a coding change. It's not additional dollars, just kind of changing where they're at in the chart. And then the vocational instruction increased pretty significantly. I've done a lot of research on that in the last year. And a lot of we are teaching some of the classes that qualify under the vocational, but we had been coding them under regular instruction because they didn't qualify for the levy dollars. But we can actually code them to vocational, they just don't qualify for the levy aspect of it. So that was just a change this year to break out to show that we are doing the programming, but it just doesn't qualify for that additional levy amount. And the decrease in instructional support is just the moving up of the technology. The regular instruction looks a little unusual because it's decreasing, and that's our largest budget line item, so that's pretty unusual. And there are a handful of things that are happening there. Some of it is just the moving out of the vocational. There's a little bit of that. Part of it is we have a new budget module in our finance software that allows me to project actual salaries better. And so this is a little bit closer number than I've maybe been able to do in the past. So part of it's just more accurate budgeting. And the collaborative classroom purchase was in 17-18, which was a significant investment. And so that comes out of there as well. So those are kind of the biggest changes in that category. So it's not that we are paying less staff or anything like that. It's just a couple of the one-time things and the way the codes are moving, if that makes sense. And then the capital outlay down on the bottom, that increase is primarily due to the increased long-term facility maintenance revenue. We have about $1.5 million more to spend annually than we had with the previous programs. So that is really shown there with the additional projects and things that we're able to complete. So we're looking at a total expenditure budget of just over $53 million. So then by object code, you can see salaries and benefits are obviously our largest portion of our budget. A few of the things here to note, the purchase service would include things like the bus. The decrease there again is partially due to the tighter, the new budgeting software. Some of our bus codes were a little inflated over what the actual expenditures were, so we were able to kind of line that up and have a better budget there. And the supplies would include things like textbooks. Our textbook budget was a little bit higher last year for some of the collaborative classroom pieces. But otherwise, overall, it's pretty consistent with salaries and benefits increasing. And then the total 53 million. So when you put that all together, this is what the summary looks like. Total revenue of 54 million, expenditures of 53, just shy of 53.2. So we are projecting a surplus of about 840,000, increasing our unrestricted fund balance and ending with a projected 22.9 unassigned fund balance. One of the things that I think is, that I just like to call out is if we got an additional $2.1 million from our levy, why are we only going to increase at 840,000? And part of that is because we are projecting a pretty significant spend down this year. And so if you roll that to next year, you're inflating that deficit, and so you kind of are starting from behind. So if that makes sense, that was one of the things that kind of jumped out at me. I was like, why aren't we increasing it to $2 million? So just so you're aware, that's kind of why that plays out that way. But overall, we are financially doing very well, projecting to be pretty consistent. Again, we have an incredibly generous community. We're very lucky to live here and be able to serve the community of Northfield. I think that is all my data, so I would welcome any questions you might have.
Excellent. As always, Val, excellent report, very thorough and explained very well. Questions or comments board members have on the proposed budget? Jeff?
What is the percentage increase, I mean, as we go up every year? I mean, what do you think is normal and what is excessive?
Well, it varies every year. I would say we average probably 3%. I would say typically our expenditures increase at a faster pace than our revenue, just because 55% is just the basic per pupil formula, and 2% doesn't even meet inflation. So when half your budget doesn't get an inflationary increase, or half your revenue budget doesn't get an inflationary increase, that typically increases at a slower rate than our expenditures, because people expect raises and those sorts of things, and we like to maintain quality staff. So I would say on average we probably are in the 3 to 4, I would say, range over the last several years.
Good question. Other questions or comments? Amy?
This is just a comment. I just wanted to say thank you for providing both the narrative and because I found that they really complement each other to start with this, and then I can understand what you're trying to tell me in a systematic way. So I just really appreciate having both. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I think Val has learned that we need that extra, but it is very much appreciated. What I really appreciated was the bus information. Hadn't really seen that, and I thought it was really interesting. And I was, I'm happy to hear that we're adding that route. I think it sounds like the right decision. And I was just curious if you know the last time we needed to add a route.
I do not know that.
Yeah, I didn't recall it myself, so I know it's not often.
I was going to say, I've been here for 7 years and we've never added one, so.
You might have to reach into Noel's memory to recall that, but.
Drew a blank.
Yeah, I think it's great, and it's so interesting to see the numbers of people who could take the bus and those that don't, and I would imagine that skewed heavily towards high school students, not utilizing the bus, which makes sense. You sort of expect to see by high school, but great to see that ridership is up. That's really good.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
Benjamin Boss has always been really wonderful partners, so I'm
They
glad
have.
we were able to work that out. And I
Yeah.
believe, did you say, or did I recall from a conversation with Dr. Hillman, it's a Bridgewater route that's
Yes.
being added? Okay.
That's the intention. I don't think they have it all finalized,
Sure,
obviously, but
potentially.
that is the intention.
Yeah,
They've had.
once they get their software working. and
Yep,
just
they've
where
had
it needs to be.
quite a bit of development and additions in the Bridgewater Heights neighborhood, as well as some of the open enrollment pieces in the kind of the Circle Lake area. So I think those routes are just getting a little tight.
Excellent. So any final questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Hillman, of course.
I would like to emphasize something that Val said. We fought and fought and fought to get 2%. And the legislature heralded it as a moment in time where we funded schools. Current inflation, 2.5%. So when we hear people talk about how they just gave a bunch of money to schools, when you're giving people money, not enough money to keep up with the bills, I think we need to go back to look at the constitutional requirements of the legislature. I promise that's the only soapbox here for right now. But yet again, Northfielders have to fill in the gap that St. Paul is unwilling to address in a long-term way. Thank God for us, right? And not the 60 other school districts who are making some substantial cuts. We don't have to make those cuts because of the generosity of the community. So we can just not thank our voters enough for the operating levy in November. Val also mentioned the spend down this year in the 17-18 budget, but I want to also remind folks that we are spending the fund, we started to spend the fund balance down at least 2 years later than what we promised in 2011. In fact, I think we actually even made it 3 years, if I'm correct.
Yep.
So my point is that the fiscal stewardship that the district has, the high quality programs that attract people to not only come here but stay here, are the reason that we are in a position that many other school districts would love to be in. And yet we have to continue to be diligent in advocating, because 70% of our revenue comes from the state. And so when we have that kind of, your major funder is the legislature, and they are lording it over you that we just gave you 2% last year. And in fact, I was very disappointed in one state senator's statement that the reason that school districts were in this difficult time, the 60 districts that are making cuts, was not because the legislature had not funded schools appropriately. We know differently. And so I continue to be disappointed in the rhetoric that comes out of St. Paul and their unwillingness to actually follow the Constitution and make sure we have a uniform system of schools through the state. I get a little fired up about that, as you might tell. So I want to just point out that we still didn't get an inflationary increase, and the good people of Northfield are filling in the gap, yet the management that the school district has done allowed us to exceed our promise to the voters in 2011 by 3 years. I'd also like Val just to talk a little bit about some federal sources, because while the federal sources are only about 3% of our revenue, almost all of that is people. And Bridgewater this year, going into next year, will no longer qualify for Title I. And what that means is that the free and reduced lunch population has dropped enough to where they no longer qualify for that benefit, but it does impact our budget. So would you just talk a little bit about the title piece that we know that Bridgewater is no longer going to qualify and how that impacts us?
Yep, so prior to this, we had both Greenville and Bridgewater that qualified for Title I. We paid for about 1.5 FTE at Bridgewater and probably close to 2, I think, at Greenville Park out of Title. So the Bridgewater is just it's a reduction. We have done some things to kind of restructure within the district to help support that transition, increasing their coaching time, basically to make that a little bit more level across the district. Greenville Park will still have the same title funding. As far as we know, we don't have the allocations yet, but there is a reduction for that. We don't have the exact dollar amounts, but I think we had about $130,000 for Bridgewater in total, off the top of my head.
Yes. We also kind of joked that you had to get budgeting software that would get you closer. When we want to know how much closer could you get, Val?
Much closer.
Would you just also briefly talk about how the 22.9% compares to the financial forecast that we've looked at over the last several years?
Yes, I of course did not bring that, but I did look at that, and I used the same enrollment projection that I used in January for the financial forecast, just for consistency. I do think our enrollment's going to come in a little higher this year than what I have shown, but just to be conservative, I left it the same as we had in January. When I looked at what I had projected for 18-19 in January and what I have presented tonight, it was actually very close. Maybe a couple $100,000 difference. So the 22.9 is pretty consistent. And again, I do think we'll end 17-18 better than what I have projected on here for our revised budget. So that will just increase that, but that will be in the audit report. So it was pretty close. So I think that was a pretty solid report.
And again, we just all know how awesome Val is and the great job that she does, and we are thankful that she shares her services with us. So, great job, Val.
Yes. Can I piggyback on your impassioned comments?
Yes.
So I did the math just for context for people. So you can see our expenditure budget is going from 51.4 to 53.1. 2% increase in state aid is approximately, if I used my $4,500 or 4,500 adjusted pupil units, is about $558,000 for the district. So that doesn't fill that gap quite completely. So just for context.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
So we will move on for our last item for discussion and report. We wanted to recap the May 21st work session and talk about next steps. The work session, we met on May 21st, 2018 to review the master facilities plan and the facilities action team recommendations. I wanted to start with just a brief recap of that meeting. So as a board, we reviewed the summary of the facilities action team and their work. The board expressed, appreciation for the facility actions team work and Dr. Hillman for facilitating a process that was able to provide good direction to the board. We discussed the results that the team came to and pointed to the greatest support that particular team came up with was to move forward with the elementary projects for November of 18. So we moved on then and had a good opportunity for discussion. The board, in our discussion, reaffirmed our commitment to the master facilities plan, including support for the modification to the Sibley plan, and obviously understanding the overarching goal of fulfilling the district's strategic plan and keeping our eye on always pointing back to the district's strategic plan, We also certainly emphasize that the needs that are addressed in the master facilities plan have not gone away, and that we continue to have those needs. Longfellow early childhood space needs we acknowledge are likely or look to be the most urgent, yet we know that there remains challenges to the Northfield High School building. And we also acknowledge that the elementary project would provide some opportunities at the high school. And so we briefly touched on how the elementary project really does have some far-reaching advantage to the high school as well. So recognizing that we need to move forward as a board, we talked about some of the issues that we still need to address. And that being what aspects of the master facilities plan do we move forward with, and when do we move forward with them. Highlighting how we need to really position a future ask to ensure that we would get support from the community when and if we choose to go for that ask. Challenges, of course, are there. Challenges being, how to best outline an ask, anticipating all the questions and challenges we would have from the community regarding any sort of bond proposal we would come forward with. We still need to obviously review tax impact for the community. Additionally, there may be some action from the city regarding a hockey arena and how that would impact the school district's ask. Since then, we had reached out to board members regarding another work session, again, to address some of the questions and the issues we still have to address to move forward. It appears that Thursday, June 7th looks to be a date where I believe, Amy, you're not able to meet. So I think that we would have 6 board members and that we would maybe choose to move forward with the 6 board members with obviously the opportunity to fill you in on what the work we would do in that June 7th work session. We also talked about really the whole communication strategy and how that would need to come together in order to really bring the community together and to understand the issue and the ask, basically. And Dr. Hillman, I know, will talk about some opportunity we may have between now and when we would need to decide how to move forward in terms of gaining some more insight into how the community feels about a potential bond question. So it was really great discussion. I appreciated everybody's input at that session. I think we were able to sort of recap where we've been, what some of the work that was done in terms of the community, presenting where they think we may want to move forward, and then really highlighting for each of us the challenges and questions around the issues of moving forward and having to do some additional work as a board prior to making a final decision. So that was the recap of the 21st. Dr. Hillman, you have some information about moving forward.
Sure. So in the packet, what I included for you, something that was requested of me at the work session, was to bring forward what are some of the key dates that we would need in terms of thinking about any potential bond issue for November specifically. Remember, there are 5 dates that we can actually call a bond election. It's the 2nd Tuesday in February, the 2nd Tuesday in April, 2nd Tuesday in May, 2nd Tuesday in August, and of course the 2nd Tuesday in November. And basically what I've got in here is the timeline as it relates to November, because that's what was asked. So the last date we would need to adopt a resolution calling a general election would be August 24th, which is of course after our first board meeting, but before our second board meeting. I wouldn't recommend that we wait that long. If we are able to get at least a direction, whichever way that is, that's helpful for the district administrators. We're actually doing some of the kind of work that could be reused no matter when no matter when or if you call it, simply so we can be prepared to anticipate your needs. But just that timeline was something that you had asked for. The other piece that I just want to share with folks that is a possibility that could help inform you a bit is we still have, if you remember at a work session after the bond issue in December, I think was when the work session was, we had the concept idea of a statistical survey, a randomized sample of the community to look at things like financial tolerance and those kinds. And it was the will at the board at that time saying, no, we really don't think that that's a necessary step at this point, and we know that it was something that was quite costly. One of the things that we do still have available is we still have a couple of processes, as they call them, with thought exchange. Now, I want to be clear, any kind of thing that we would do with thought exchange between now and your decision point would not be a scientific survey, in terms of the kind of randomized, stratified sample where you would have a margin of error. But as you begin to narrow in on what might the question be, in terms of if you're looking at that, we potentially could seek feedback through the thought exchange platform for you in order to help you either make some decisions or to inform any kind of communication that we might have moving forward. Thought Exchange has changed the way that they do their approach. They normally would have had if you remember, it takes about 2 weeks and then they have a week off and then another 2 weeks. They have a new platform that combines both the share and the star step into one. It's a little bit different. But for the purposes of what we're trying to get, just some community feedback on your general thought process, it could be some pretty good information for you. It would not cost the district any more money because we have one of these processes still available with them. And it might be a way for you, again, to see, what does the community think, or what the more important part would be, what questions would the community have specifically around, say, one part of the master facilities plan. When we were giving information and getting feedback prior, we were doing about the entirety of it, and we know that there were some parts of the plan that elicited more questions than others. This might be a good way to unearth what questions there might be about some parts of the plan that you have thought about moving forward that maybe haven't been unearthed yet. So again, I want to be very clear, it wouldn't be any kind of, you have a plus or minus, of this many voters, but it would be an opportunity to gain some feedback from the community. One of the things that we've struggled with Thought Exchange has been to get people who don't have children in school to participate. Something I would suggest that's a relatively low-cost way to invite people would be to use a postcard, and we would send that postcard to all of the eligible voters within the school district. We have that list from the Secretary of State. It would actually be quite easy for us to basically send that postcard out to everyone. We'd be able to give them a web address that they could go to, and when if you were to say, go ahead and think about doing this, when Thought Exchange were to go live, they'd be able to access it through that link that is on their postcard. That way people would have an opportunity, people who don't get emails from within the district, it would give us an opportunity to hear the voices of other folks. Again, it's not a vote. Thought Exchange isn't like that. As you know, it's not plus or minus 2% of people felt this way. But you would have an opportunity to hear some of the questions that might be out there and how highly people rated those. So those are just two pieces that came out of my thinking after the last work session that I thought might be helpful to share with you. And so I'm curious, again, Thought Exchange is something that we've already approved a couple of years ago. So we don't need any kind of board action to do it, but if you were to give me some general direction, we could certainly get that process started.
If we sent out a postcard and it had a link, would it be an individualized link?
It would not. They've changed the way that they do their sign up. So it would be one link that everyone could use. It's a new platform. So they have what they call a common sign up link. And so once people sign up, then they'd be able to get the reminders and those kinds of things, but it's not an individualized link.
Is there any way to know that we're getting responses from different individuals?
We would ask a demographic question. So we would ask, are you a parent, of students within our school? Are you a community member? I had just a brief phone conversation with Thought Exchange today to determine, is this something we could even pull off? And they said that we certainly could. And yes, we can ask a demographic question. So we, just like when you see, the regular Thought Exchange, the annual weather report, where we divide it out by the response to that demographic question. Are you a parent? Are you a staff member? Are you a parent and or a staff member? Or are you a community member? We would get that same kind of differentiation.
But that's not exactly what I'm looking for. I'm worried about, and because I like the idea of collecting data, I'm worried about certain people going in multiple times.
Correct. That is not possible under under the system, is my understanding. I will double check that. That's been something that we have been able to, because remember, it isn't, what I think is important to remember, it is, Thought Exchange is a little bit different because we don't necessarily, you get one opportunity at the start, and the way that they're doing this now, you actually do the share and the star in the same step. So I don't believe that there is a way to, well, I should take that back. With all technology, I'm sure that there's a way to get around that, but I think in general, my sense is that there are safeguards built in. I can certainly just go back and ask that question, but they have a high level of commitment to giving you accurate, feedback, and so I think that I have trust in their platform, and even the new platform, which I have a little bit of a difference of opinion over their methodology, which I won't bore anyone with this evening, but I have confidence that we would not have that issue. Plus, in general, I do have trust for our community. In terms of, people playing by the rule. Of course, anytime you do something like this, there may be a handful of people who don't.
One or two, yeah.
But I think the key thing would be that I do have trust for Northfield and their integrity, and I think the fact would be that it would not be something that you would necessarily use to make a decision on, but it would give you some information that might inform the way that you're thinking.
And they might be able to track IP addresses or something like that, which would, if we had 100 responses from the same IP address, we might start thinking something was fishy.
Well, and interestingly enough, If you're taking the survey within the school, everybody comes out as the single IP address. So, but I think that they do have some methodology to try to combat that. At the same time, what I would want to assure people is that when they are participating in Thought Exchange, it is anonymous and confidential. So I've seen the back end of the system, where even if you register your email address, to get onto the system, which is what people generally do, there's no way for us to track, for anyone to track, which email was associated with which answer set. It simply is, did you take it or did you not, so that they can provide those reminders. And so I've had a chance to see the back end of that, and there is no way for that to cross over. We want people to have confidence that what they share is anonymous and confidential. Unless they write their name on it, which some people do from time to time.
Well, and Dr. Hillman, so again, to recap, so that, what would be really interesting to see our community member participations hovered around 2% of the total. So it would be really interesting to see where that percentage would be affected by this, very intentional outreach. And then things are sort of done around the theme of results, so that if someone were either pro or providing, opposition type comments, they would still be gathered around the central theme to where you would see some of the themes play out. So I agree, I hear what Amy's saying, but I also think that we have the opportunity then to gather sort of some overarching type sort of themes around the issue of.
Yeah, like any survey tool, it has its strengths and it has its flaws. And as long as we know those strengths and flaws, right, that allows us to utilize the tool in a way that helps us inform your thought process. I want to be really clear that, again, it's not a piece that I would expect you to use it as, a voting piece, but it may unearth some questions that we may not have heard yet from the public that it would allow us, if you were to choose to move forward, to anticipate some of those questions and prepare a better communication strategy to inform the community. That we left it all out in the field the last time, and we'll continue to make sure that we do that. But we also, if we can get some of those thoughts up front, the fact would be that we can serve our public better.
I think it also gives people the opportunity to feel heard, which is something we heard over and over again, is that I didn't know this was coming up. Nobody asked me, maybe this time around people would be more aware of what's happening and more eager to participate in this type of information collection.
Those of you at this table who know me know that I'm committed to continuous improvement, not only for myself, but for the district. And I can still remember being in the auditorium and a person standing up at the end, despite all of what we had thought we had done for high quality communication and had good reinforcement. We had a person who's sticking in my mind just talking about how they hadn't heard about it before and had some suggestions about how we could potentially do better. And you've seen that we now have a district update that's part of our community services brochure. That was directly from that person's feedback that evening at our public meeting in the auditorium. And the postcard is another idea that came from that, and the fact that we have to recognize that the district is more than the city of Northfield. So we have a number of people who may not get the Northfield news, they may not listen to KYMN radio, they may not, a postcard directing them. We can't give substantial print resources to everyone pretty regularly, but a postcard pointing you to a web resource I think is a reasonable strategy. Low cost, but yet high impact, because we can send it to a lot of people for a very reasonable cost, especially doing bulk mailing.
So just a point of clarification, Dr. Hillman, is this something that you would need to hear that the board is willing to move forward with now in order to implement a timeline, or would that be something we could discuss on the June 7th session?
We absolutely can. The timeline that I went over with Thought Exchange, because I just didn't want to talk about this and then not have some kind of timeline. Basically, if we were to plan to try to start at the week of June 11th, the way they would run it is it would run for about 3 to 4 weeks total from beginning to end, and you would be able to have some of the data. They don't think they could have it for the June 9th board meeting, but they may be able to have it just after that. So we do everything we could to get it for the July 9th board meeting, but it may be a piece that depending on how this goes, we may have to seek about, potentially a special meeting, or, a work session or something to hear some of it. They will do everything they can to have the preliminary report, for July 9th. It might not be able to be in the packet, due to the holiday the week before, but you might at least be able to hear at that board meeting, the initial report from them on this specific process.
So just a point, so June 11th, if we were to move forward with it tonight, would they be able to move it up to like a June 4th and then be able to time it better around July 9th? Or is that June 11th around their timeline?
I think I would be more comfortable having it right after the June 7th work session.
Okay.
Simply because I'm not sure I'm at a point where I think that I've heard consensus from the board yet on what questions, because the key thing is, what we would want to do is if you have a consensus part in mind, those are the that's the question that we would want to ask, so that we're not having things that you're not considering muddying up the water, so to speak.
Yeah, good point of clarification. I'm sorry, that makes complete sense then. We want to be sure that we're asking the right questions. I apologize. Amy, you had another comment.
I was just going to ask what questions we were thinking of asking,
Yes,
so
good.
we don't have any answer to that yet.
Well, I do actually have, because the question that I would ask is, it's not necessarily connected to the content of it. I can tell you about what we would generally look at with this. The key thing would be, what questions do you have about the potential proposal? So that would be the core of it, because what you'd be looking for is, what are the things that after a very short intro, and I think we'd be looking at doing it kind of video-based, very short video with some backup documentation that people could look at. This is the concept that the board is thinking about. What questions might you have? Then you could go to the other questions in terms of, what are things that you appreciate about this proposal? What are concerns you might have about this proposal? You would limit it to no more than 3 questions, and frankly, I think we could even get what we need out of what questions you have about this proposal, because as you know, that questions question actually tends to be the most informative, for you, because that would show the areas where, people may feel that they need more information. But those are pieces that I have another conference call with Thought Exchange on Thursday. I said I would share with them what you were thinking in general tonight, and then we can start to work on those next steps. And then we would just only move forward after that June 7th work session.
Totally makes sense. Okay. All right, so board members, other questions or comments? Work session recap, how we are going to move forward and reconvene on June 7th to look at how we move forward. No.
I'm thinking, and that always scares me.
Turn your mic on.
It is on, I'm just a long ways away from it.
Actually, I think it's off, Noel, actually.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Would you ask Thought Exchange how consistent their research shows all generations, effectiveness of all generations?
I will ask them that
I'm
question.
of a generation that I get my information from anything I can read, except on the screen. As my wife gets everything she wants to know on the screen. And Thought Exchange for me isn't the way to be able to respond to something. But to be a minority, ask if you would this.
Yes, and we could potentially even ask that as a demographic question.
Maybe as part of the postcard, I could say, these are the 3 questions we have. If you prefer to mail an answer to us, and allow a chance for people to send in a letter. Because I see what you're saying. There's a lot of people who just don't have that facility with computers, and to tell them to go to a website might be a huge barrier. But they might be very passionate about what their thoughts are on this topic and be willing to write them down and send them in.
And the struggle with that would be the way that Thought Exchange works, the star step, where you're giving feedback on the other comments. It would not, unfortunately, the handwritten part in this just does not align with the work that they do. So we could certainly take that. The issue would be that it would not most likely be something where they'd be able to participate in the full. What I would actually rather do in that case is potentially even host maybe a couple of open computer lab nights where people who would want to come in and have an opportunity, because then we could coach them through the process in terms of that. So that's the issue. Normally we are able to print stuff out and get feedback that way. In this case, just because of the two-step process, I don't think people, in fact, I know people would not be able to, it would be challenging to marry those two particular parts. But there are some other ways that we could potentially, again, wanting to be as inclusive as possible, we could potentially open our computer lab again on a couple of evenings and have one of us here in terms of anybody who wants to come in and complete it. They could do it with us here to coach them along the way.
Then they come into the school and see the school too.
There you go.
That's actually a really good idea. Good comments. So we'll move forward Thursday, June 7th from 5 to 7 p.m. When would you anticipate the board would get the agenda for that meeting?
So we usually are 72 hours in it, so I anticipate you would get that on Monday.
Good. Right. Excellent. All right, thank you.
Is there any way that, this is like the busiest time in my life, so I don't want to, with my daughter graduating on Sunday and everything, and I have company coming, and then I'm traveling, but I want to be involved somehow, and I'm not quite sure how. So I'm just putting that out there, saying if there's some, if I can have a conversation with Dr. Hillman or with Julie or somehow.
Would you like us to hook up a video conference link?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, I'll have my daughter with me in Seattle, and it's 2 hours earlier there, and we're doing college to it. So, but maybe there's some way that, because I know that my opinion might be a little bit of an outlier, so I would like to have.
And we can follow up with you, Amy, in terms of setting up something, I think, with you and
Absolutely.
Julie, or you and Julie and I. And
Okay.
And again, it won't be the last time that we'll discuss this, but I think with having 6 of the 7 board members available and a somewhat tight timeline, if we were to move forward in November, we need to seize the opportunity.
Yeah, I don't want to stop you.
No, and
But I appreciate you wanting to have your input, because we do want to get it, so we can talk after about how we might facilitate that. Other part, Jeff?
Do we have any, this is, to me, marketing is basically lead generation, and, sales is lead conversion, but that's a different thing. What I'm talking about in terms of getting a message out, if I was going to go in and you said you've got something coming out for a vote, just give me the email that I can sign up for, and you can go ahead and send all this stuff to me on some email blast, and I'll go back and read them when I've got time. Do we do that? Okay.
we have the ability to do that.
Right.
How we've done that in the past to this point, Jeff, is mostly an email blast.
Well, I'm not saying a blast, trickle marketing. You give a little bit of the information of that, and here's a link, 3-minute video, 5-minute video, all this other stuff, because, Northfield in itself, just being a townie, is, we're consumed about it, and you're right, people communicate differently. Some people read the paper, someone like an email, someone like whatever else. But it's also an obligation as a citizen to know what's going on in government, to pay attention, to know when these dates come up and what the issues are, and give feedback, positive and negative, and use your freedom of speech. So, with that,
there would be an opportunity. I appreciate that, Jeff, because what we could do is for people who don't have children in the community, when we send that postcard, we could also ask people on that postcard, if you'd like to receive email updates about this topic, send a message. We could actually include another Google form where people could then sign up, and then we could use our Skylar system to send those folks a message as well. They would have opted in. So we always want to be careful. We don't want to be considered to be spammers, of course. But if you have an opt-in piece, that would be a very positive thing.
And with mail, people get with the nonprofits or whatever, you get a postcard, you look at it, it's got a link, it's got whatever else on it. You're looking at it like that, you set it there, you follow up on it, and that's the easiest way, I should say, the clearest way, I think, a lot of times to communicate with people.
Well, and I will actually add, because that is even broader, as we want to share the story of Logan Ledman, right, with more than just the people who read the Northfield News, who have done a nice job with that, Kate Wyman, who reaches a lot of people. We've included things like that in the community services brochure. We've moved it to the front of the community services brochure, but we would like to share that message more often. And if we do have community members who are willing to sign up for our little updates, we'd be happy to do that. So that's something we could certainly take a look at. And I'm looking at Erin because she would normally help me with it, but I don't think Aaron's gonna be here at that time, so I'll look back.
Some notes for you.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Well, and I think Jeff has a good point that pretty much everyone does email these days, so that's sort of a base level of, if we can get them in their email, we can get to them, so.
Well, there's two main, kind of blow-offs or add-ons. It's like, well, send me an email, and the other one is, well, three. Okay, call the 800 number or look at YouTube. It's like, but people they want to have an opportunity to find their information in different sources. So.
And that's interesting. There was a recent research study that came out this spring, with the rush for school districts to get their information to social media, which we've been an intentional laggard on a little bit, actually. The research actually says people prefer to get information about their local school system in their email, which actually bucks all conventional wisdom right now, but it appears that now our social media feeds are as clogged as our email used to be, and now our email isn't quite as clogged, so people are looking for it in their email account. So we try to leverage research when we can.
The pendulum swing.
Yes, it does.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you for this, for the discussion tonight on next steps. And so we'll reconvene in a work session on Thursday, June 7th. We now, second board meeting of the month, committee reports, opportunity for board members to give a brief overview of the committee positions we serve on as school board liaisons, and we have two of those this evening. First, Amy Borowitz on the ENACT committee. So if you want to briefly present that, Amy?
Sure. So the ENACT committee is now a new committee this year, but it's a combination of two former committees, the District Curriculum and Staff Development, which everybody always called the DCSDC committee, and the District Tech Steering Committee. And they meet 2 to 3 times a year, like 2 times during the year, and then a summer meeting to get things set up. And they just recently met on April 16th for their final meeting of the year. Their main thing that they do is they have a little pot of money which they can give out as grants to staff members, mostly teachers, to try something new and interesting. It's meant to be a creative, innovative source of money for the teachers. And since this was the first year, we got a good number of requests for grants. We had 13, and out of those 13, we were able to fund 11 of them. One of them got turned back, and then one we were able to find money from a different source. So we're thinking that as teachers hear more and more about this, there's going to be more grant requests. The total fund of money was $18,000, and if you look on the attachment, you'll see there's a list of the type of grants that were funded. Just a lot of different things, and it all has to be one-time funding, and if it looks like the type of thing that might need to be sustainable after the first year, they have to have a sustainability plan. And like all good programs, at the end of this year, the ENACT committee came up with some ideas of how to even improve it for next year, continuous improvement. We're looking for that. And so one of the things we're looking to do next year is to have everybody who receives a grant create a short, 2 to 5 minute video explaining their grant and what happened with it. And so maybe by this time next year, I might have a video or two to share with the group. Right, Mary Grace?
Right.
Okay. So if you have any questions, I'll take them, but I think pretty much most things are self-explanatory.
Thank you.
It's good to see the changes to the DCSDC committee and how they're moving forward. So great, thank you, Amy. I submitted the other committee report, and that was follow-up to our Dr. Hillman and I attended the Schools for Equity in Education meeting this past Friday, and of course, big topic of discussion, and I'll review it quickly, was the 2018 legislative session overview. Obviously not a lot to report, but in terms of, Brad Lindell said that districts could go back to their district and pull a piece of plain paper out of their copy machine, and that was the bill that represented the bill this year. So a little bit of sarcasm, but...
I'm sorry, I wish I would have brought a blank sheet of paper. We would have been...
So I think now we know the emergency school funding and the omnibus spending bill were both vetoed by the governor. why the bills would have provided safe schools revenue, increased revenue for special education, as well as some money on the per pupil formula. Several provisions with both bills would have significantly challenged schools to implement, i.e. unfunded mandates. And really the unfunded mandates were quite prevalent throughout both bills regarding any issue. So that was disappointing, and that there was such a big bill. It was 990 pages. Technology maybe being a disadvantage in that bills are able to be put together pretty quickly and added on and added on and added on. But I think there was probably some difficult and very challenging issues for us had that bill passed in terms of some of the policy that would have been required. And again, unfunded mandates would have really not been a positive for us. So light, I guess at the end of the tunnel, potentially the bonding bill and the pension bill are pending the governor's signature and are likely to be signed. The bonding bill, again, if signed by the governor, provides $25 million from the state general fund for grants up to $500,000 for each school building to do significant safety enhancements. And of course, Northfield already on that and currently preparing to apply for some of these grants. So there could be significant money. Again, up to $500,000 for each school building. So we could, again, Jim Culseth is looking at that. And so once that bill is signed and they're able to give us the sort of the what the grant looks like and how we need to apply, we'll be right there ready to go with the projects that we could do. So hopefully we would be ahead of the curve on that and potentially receive some significant money. The pension bill, Val alluded to that in her presentation, does increase the district's contribution rate for the Teachers Retirement Association, TRA. We are hopeful, however, that there is state aid adjustment to offset this additional cost. School safety, which we probably thought would have been somewhat of a slam dunk and had been pushed for. Several legislators, the governor as well, wanted it to be a clean bill and one that could maybe have been addressed early on in the session, was part of the omnibus bill, so did not make it through. It is likely that that one will come back, so we would hopefully maybe see some school safety. Disappointing in that we thought there might be some working groups, possibly particularly around special ed, and what we know is some ongoing challenges with the cost of special education, and maybe looking at how to maybe again address some of the unfunded mandates as part of the special education. So that will not happen. So overall, very disappointing. I think Brad Lindell had a very insightful comment when he said, as elected officials on the school board and as school district administrators, we're required to make decisions and move forward, and there weren't a lot of decisions that were made this legislative session. So we'll move forward and hope that the next biennium budget will reflect some work that we know needs to happen with education. So any questions?
I would just point out that Jim has $347,000 of safety projects that we are prepared to apply for, but it is a first come, first serve, and then we don't know what the other criteria will be yet. So we already have the list of things. We're prepared to be able to submit those. We just don't know what all the other rules or what the time frame will be. The one thing that they have made clear is that it will be first come, first serve. So we're going to do everything we can to be ready to go on that. I think that's important. I think the other piece just to point out is that I saw today the governor signed 14 bills. These are smaller, more specific bills to other kinds of programming or other policy-related pieces. And I think it goes to your point, Julie, that if this thought process behind this mega bill really puts all of your cards on the table and only one outcome either way, but yet we have 14 bills that are policy wonk kinds of bills that went through today. That if you look at it, if the legislature were to adopt that approach, we might actually be able to get some of these things done. And so I just think it's important for you to watch that as board members, that when they take education policy and they mix it in with all of these other pieces and they marry policy and funding, it's an issue that has held us back now numerous times. And my hope is that as we move forward, we can use our time at the legislature not only to advocate for what we want, right, but also for how we want it, because I'm becoming more and more concerned about procedure at the Capitol as well, just to add that on to your excellent report.
Excellent comments. Okay, thank you. So now we'll move on to approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were a few personnel items in the table file to be added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping? Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Amy. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on for items for individual action. We just have one item this evening, and that is around the changes to the school district handbooks. So I would ask if there's a motion to approve the elementary school family handbook, the student handbooks for the high school, area learning center, middle school, and the co-curricular activities handbook, and the student citizenship handbook for the 2018-19 school year as presented. Moved by Rob. Is there a second? Second by Noel. Any questions or comments? Again, just want to thank Anita for giving us this very concise list so that we could work through and understand the changes to those handbooks. So thank you for that. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Items for information. Dr. Hillman, we have a first reading on a policy 515.
Yes, this is a policy that we had a couple of thoughts about revising, and then actually part of our review took care of one of the concerns that we had. But what we're asking is just, I consider it to be actually quite a minor modification. As Aaron Bailey and I have been looking at this, some of the things around photos, we had just some antiquated language only around web pages, and we feel it's important as we continue to use social media more often that as part of that policy that when we're allowed to use student photographs for things like in publications and whatnot, that we're clear about the fact that it does include district, school, and department social media sites. That's actually the only change within the policy. And then you'll also see that there's an associated form, Appendix C, I believe it is, that I just wanted you to see, that again shows that there's an opportunity there for people to understand very clearly that their photograph, if they did not sign the denial of release, could also be used in district and school social media sites. The one other concern that came forward, I'll just point out, is that we had a concern about how, I may not want to opt my entire, or I may not want to give my information or not deny all of my information because I might want my student to be able to be listed in, say, a choir program. One of the pieces as we've gone back and looked at this is that you can deny release of directory information and then allow something to be included if you give express written permission. So in a case where a parent might want to have their child, their name listed in a choir program, they would simply write to the school saying, I give my express permission for Greenville Park Elementary School to allow my child's name to be listed in the choir program despite the fact that I filled out the denial of release of information form. So we don't get a lot of questions like that, but as we do, that's how we'll direct people moving forward. But the only change in it this time is really about making sure that people understand that it includes social media, which I think we would all have expected, but we just want to make sure the policy reflects the current reality.
How many people deny that further information to be released?
I don't have the number for you right now, but what I can tell you is that that number at the secondary schools is very few, like less than a handful total. It tends to be a little more prevalent in elementary school. However, it still is not more. I feel safe saying it's not any more than 10 per building. And of course it changes year to year.
Sure. Any other questions? Rob?
Just reading over the language here, this is just a minor thing, but I think the "and" that's crossed out shouldn't be crossed out.
Okay, let's take a look.
Because it's public presentations and web pages, and then limiting that, including blah, blah, blah. So I think the "and" in that series needs to be there to close off the series, you know what I'm saying? So
We shall make sure we take a look at the grammatical component and fix it because we appreciate that kind of.
because you have you have including district, school, and departmental social media sites. So maybe the thought was there was that other "and," but I think the first "and" still needs to be there.
Okay, let me just make sure here I scrolled past it, so. Thank you.
He's saying let's.
Yeah, yep. And web pages include, yep, okay, very good. Yes, we will put the "and" back in. Thank you for catching that.
Well, and Rob Hardy knows how often I've looked at him to do editing for me, so anytime you suggest an edit, it's typically
We want to get it right.
on. Exactly. You're an excellent editor. Other questions or comments? I just had one question then about Appendix C. So what we're saying is if that parent does complete that, but then would have to take the additional step for things like inclusion of their student's name in some sort of a activities program, would that muddy the waters if we added that to Appendix C? Does this have to be a clean document then?
I think, what we are always balancing this with is our ability with our very lean administration to keep track. So we've actually had folks who've asked, could we have a menu of, I'd like my students, allowed to for this, but not for this. We just aren't set up with that kind of administrative oomph to be able to manage that. And then this is the kind of thing that we never want to make a mistake with, right? So the key thing is that while we've thought about, that you have to intentionally do the denial or release form, and then if you have a specific piece that you'd like to give us express written consent, we want you to take that action so that it's very clear about what is acceptable and what's not, because for different people it could be different things. That will have to be managed at the building level because that's not something we'll be able to keep a database of at the district level. But we actually have very few people who want to do that, but we want to make sure they have that opportunity. And actually the current policy has allowed for that. We're just, if we have people who call and ask, we've had one person specifically, we can share with them, here's how we would make that happen.
Okay, excellent. So we have a process, which is great.
Amy? I guess I'm just surprised. I would think that, I understand why people wouldn't want to be in the directory, but to not have their kid's name in the music program or the play program or something, I mean, and that you have to keep track of that too. I mean, how often do people actually complain that their kids' names are listed as part of the choir?
So actually, I apologize for my lack of clarity there. When you sign the denial of release of directory information, you opt out of everything that's in the list. The express written permission would allow you to be placed back into the choir. The issue is that sometimes we may have circumstances where people may not want someone to pick up a program and see that their child is enrolled at that school. So there could be some safety issues for people that might be the reason why they want their child to participate in choir but not have their name listed. So there are some pretty difficult reasons actually from time to time that someone may want their names not listed in those kinds of programs.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a variety of reasons why people would do it, but that's one where it would make sense.
Well, we have a process of addressing it, so it's good. All right, excellent. So we will approve this policy change that at our June 9th board meeting.
June 11th.
June 11th board meeting. Okay, excellent. So as you review it, if you have any questions prior to that meeting, you can direct those to Dr. Hillman. Also in your packet were the school board meeting schedule beginning July of 2018 through June of 2019. We have upcoming dates. We again discussed the work session on Thursday, June 7th from 5 to 7 p.m. Here in the High School Media Center. We also have one of the great events of the year, and what I know as board members we look forward to is graduation. Area Learning Center graduation is Friday, June 1st at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium, and the Northfield High School graduation Sunday, June 3rd at 2 p.m. at Memorial Field, and board members, please meet in the high school office at 1:30. And we would like to thank in advance Kim Radio for broadcasting the graduation. It's really great that they do that. And with the addition of the 95.1 FM channel, that really helps people get good, clear coverage of the graduation. So we really appreciate that. Future meetings, Monday, June 11th, 2018, 7 p.m. here in the High School Media Center, and then only one board meeting in June. So then in July, we would reconvene for a regular board meeting on Monday, July 9th, also at 7 p.m. in the High School Media Center. So with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Moved by Noel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Amy. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Excellent.